Imagine working your entire life, diligently paying into a system that promises to take care of you in your golden years. You reach retirement, relieved to finally enjoy the fruits of your labor, only to discover that someone who retired just a few years after you receives thousands of pounds more each year despite making identical contributions. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. It's the harsh reality facing millions of Britain's oldest pensioners today. Have you ever wondered if our pension system truly rewards those who contributed the most? Or whether the government's policies are leaving our most vulnerable seniors behind? If you care about fairness in our society, about ensuring dignity for those who built this country, or if you're approaching retirement yourself, you need to understand this growing crisis. The decisions made today about our pension system will affect generations to come, and your voice matters in this crucial conversation. The heart of this issue lies in what experts are calling a fundamental flaw in Britain's pension reforms. Men born before April 6, 1951, and women born before April 6, 1953, are trapped in an outdated pension system that provides significantly less financial support than what newer retirees receive. These aren't just random dates on a calendar, they represent an arbitrary dividing line that has created two classes of pensioners in our society. On one side stand 9.3 million older Britons receiving the old state pension, on the other, 3.4 million benefiting from the more generous new state pension introduced in 2016. What makes this situation particularly troubling is the growing gap between these two groups. The triple lock system, designed to ensure pensions rise in line with inflation, average earnings, or a fixed 2.5%, doesn't fully apply to those on the older pension scheme. While it sounds like a technical detail, the real-world impact is devastating. Those on the old state pension receive just £169.20 per week, amounting to £8,798 annually. Compare this to the new state pension, which provides £11,502.40 per year, a staggering difference of over £3,000 annually. Can you imagine what an extra £3,000 a year would mean to an elderly person living on a fixed income? For many, it's the difference between heating their home adequately in winter or living in cold conditions to save money. It might determine whether they can afford nutritious meals or must skip meals to make ends meet. This isn't about luxury, it's about basic dignity and survival for people who have contributed their entire working lives to our nation. The inequality becomes even more pronounced when you consider that many of these older pensioners face additional health challenges that come with advanced age. Many are in their 70s, 80s, or even 90s, dealing with chronic conditions, mobility issues, or cognitive decline. These health concerns often bring additional expenses at precisely the time when their pension income is falling further behind that of younger retirees. How can we justify a system that provides less support to those who may need it most? Another troubling aspect of this pension divide is its complexity. Although some pensioners on the older system are entitled to additional earnings-related payments through the state earnings-related pension scheme, these additional amounts aren't fully protected by the triple lock. This means that as time passes, the gap between the old and new systems grows ever wider. Two people who retired with identical pension amounts in 2016, one under the old system and one under the new, would now find themselves with significantly different incomes. Is this not a clear case of inequality embedded within our welfare system? The emotional toll of this situation cannot be overlooked. Many elderly pensioners feel betrayed by a government they supported throughout their working lives. They watched as they paid their national insurance contributions year after year, believing they were securing their future. Now, they witness younger retirees who may have worked fewer years or contributed less overall receiving substantially more generous pensions. Beyond the financial hardship, there's a profound sense of injustice that weighs heavily on these older Britons. Have we become a society that forgets its obligations to those who built our country? Former Pensions Minister Sir Steve Webb has acknowledged the problem but highlighted the immense complexity of addressing it. He described Britain's pension system as horribly complex, suggesting that any solution would require significant reform. But should complexity be an excuse for inaction when the well-being of millions of vulnerable citizens is at stake? While the system may indeed be complicated, the principle at stake is simple: equal treatment for all pensioners who have fulfilled their obligations to society. Caroline Abrahams from Age UK has expressed empathy for older pensioners affected by this disparity. She notes that many will feel angry and resentful when they realise they are receiving less than younger retirees despite having paid their full national insurance contributions. This sentiment is entirely understandable. How would any of us feel if we discovered that an arbitrary birth date determined whether we received thousands of pounds less each year in retirement? Despite growing criticism, the Department for Work and Pensions has largely dismissed these concerns. A spokesperson claimed the government remains committed to ensuring pensioners enjoy dignity and respect in retirement. But how can there be dignity when millions of older pensioners struggle to make ends meet while watching their younger counterparts receive significantly more support? Words of commitment ring hollow without concrete action to address this fundamental inequality. The disparity raises profound questions about intergenerational fairness and the social contract between citizens and government. When people contribute to a system throughout their working lives, they do so with the understanding that they will be treated fairly in return. The current pension structure violates this basic principle, creating winners and losers based on nothing more than birth dates. What message does this send about how we value our oldest citizens? This situation is particularly alarming when we consider the rising cost of living. Energy bills, food prices, and healthcare costs continue to increase, putting additional pressure on fixed incomes. For those receiving the lower old state pension, each price increase means another difficult decision about what necessities to cut back on. In a wealthy nation like Britain, should any pensioner who has contributed fully to the system be forced to choose between heating and eating? The human stories behind these statistics are heartbreaking. Consider Margaret, who worked for 45 years as a nurse in the NHS, retiring just months before the new pension system took effect. Despite her decades of service caring for others, she now receives thousands of pounds less each year than colleagues who retired just after her. Or James, who worked in a factory for 50 years, paying his national insurance without fail, only to find himself struggling to afford basic necessities while watching neighbours who retired under the new system enjoy greater financial security. These aren't isolated cases, they represent millions of similar stories across Britain. The question we must ask ourselves as a society is clear: are we willing to accept a system that penalises our oldest citizens through no fault of their own? Or do we demand changes that ensure all pensioners receive fair treatment regardless of when they were born? The complexity of pension reform cannot be an excuse for maintaining an unjust status quo. What would a solution look like? Some advocate for bringing all pensioners under the new state pension system, ensuring everyone receives the same basic amount regardless of when they retired. Others suggest targeted increases for those on the old state pension to bridge the gap without completely overhauling the system. Whatever approach is taken, the goal must be to eliminate the current two-tier system that leaves millions of older Britons at a significant disadvantage. The cost of addressing this inequality would undoubtedly be substantial. Estimates suggest it could require billions of pounds annually. However, we must weigh this financial cost against the moral cost of continuing to shortchange millions of our oldest citizens. In a budget that finds money for various priorities, surely ensuring fair treatment for those who built our nation deserves consideration. What does it say about our values if we cannot find the resources to correct this injustice? As this issue gains more attention, pensioners and advocates are increasingly vocal about the need for change. Grassroots organizations are forming to pressure politicians and raise public awareness. But meaningful reform will require broader public support and political will. This is where your voice becomes crucial. Do you believe in fairness for all pensioners? Do you think someone's birth date should determine whether they receive thousands of pounds less in retirement? If you're concerned about this growing pension divide, there are several ways to take action. Contact your local MP to express your views on pension equality. Join advocacy groups fighting for fair treatment of all pensioners. Share information about this issue on social media to raise awareness. And if you're approaching retirement yourself, understand how these policies might affect you and add your voice to calls for reform. Together, we can work toward a pension system that truly honors the contributions of all Britons, regardless of when they were born. The strength of our society can be measured by how we treat our most vulnerable members. The current pension system is failing millions of our oldest citizens, creating a division that grows wider with each passing year. As we face this challenge, we must ask ourselves what kind of country we want to be. Will we accept a system that arbitrarily disadvantages those who have contributed their entire lives? Or will we stand for the principles of fairness and dignity that should be at the heart of our welfare system? The answer will shape not just the lives of today's pensioners but the society we build for future generations.